let's switch now to how you are aggregating data for the type of research that OM1 conducts. There's a lot of discussion of data provenance, and I'm interested if you can comment on how you assess the data as fit for purpose, and what you think the future of data aggregation utility is, if this is a concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so let's talk about fit for purpose first. So I think about fit for purpose to be, has the data been acquired in a way that yields a high quality data set for the particular question? Does it have sufficient and representative population sample? Can you understand and mitigate the biases? Is it the least costly approach to address the question most completely? You know, as the FDA would ask, has the conduct of the study met FDA regulatory requirements for submission, if that is a purpose, like traceability and auditability? So from our perspective, what we think about is leveraging networks. And to dig into that a little bit more, in order to capture deep clinical information in the US healthcare system, you need to go to the providers who are seeing the patients in a consistent way with the conditions that you're interested in studying. In the US, if you're unfortunate enough to have, say, a chronic disease or non-chronic disease, if it persists long enough, you will be referred to a specialist. So our view is, if you create networks of specialists that you can automate the collection of data from their source systems, that's sort of the first step in the chain to be able to have a rich data set that is likely to contain the outcomes on the conditions you're interested in. So by that, I mean, you know, for us, we've set up about 8 different specialist networks in fields like dermatology and rheumatology, or in gastroenterology focusing on IBD, or in cardiology, or in respiratory, or in ENT, neurology, and mental health. And in these specialty areas, we're connecting to specialists who see patients in a consistent way in general in the US. They're better able to assess for outcomes because that's what they're trained to do. And if you want to ask them to collect additional data, they're more likely to be able to implement, say, an easy score in dermatology than a primary care doc. So that leads to some advantages. So that's sort of step one for data collection from our perspective. But the step 2 and 3 is about, how do you get more broad? How do you extend the data from a clinician seeing a patient to the full experience of that patient, that full journey? And so that's where we want to link in data from medical and pharmacy claims data, where we want to understand more about the patient that may be in their medical record by linking in social determinants of health data. So we look at things like not just race and ethnicity, but income level, education status, estimated FICO score, things like that we have found, you know, true differences both in access to care and response to treatment using that kind of information. We want to look at the providers, so we want to understand how the provider who has seen the patient impacts the outcomes, and, you know, what you can learn as a life sciences company about, you know, the providers that you want to focus in on to maximize the opportunity for the most effective treatment of patients with your therapies. We link in clinical trials data in some cases to be able to follow patients longitudinally, or medical device data to be able to follow patients with medical devices. So linkage plays a very, very big role in augmenting that core data set of patients being followed longitudinally by specific providers. And within the context of the specialists, we can also introduce the collection of patient-reported outcomes information, and even sometimes clinician surveys, or capturing very specific information that may not be captured in routine clinical practice. So that's our model for collecting data. On top of that, we look at what will be the use case purpose of that data. So if that data is going to be submitted to the FDA or another regulatory body, then we need to be able to capture that data with traceability, so the ability to trace every transformation of information that happens down through these automated pipelines, and auditability, meaning
Mhm.
that you need to set up the opportunity for an FDA inspector to be able to go to a provider and look at their electronic medical record system and ensure that the data in your database is exactly what was in that EMR in order to complete that audit, if you will. So the fit for purpose comes to bear, types of data come to bear, but in the end, if you're collecting clinical data, it's all about the outcomes, and that's what we want to focus on. And I would say that part of collecting data for us is capturing data well beyond the structured information that's generally captured in many different portals of information, billing systems and so on, and going to the less structured information. So information that is in the clinical narrative, in the clinical note, in the procedure report, in the radiology image report, in the genetics report, to be able to capture that information, because a lot of the key information is now captured in the unstructured notes, because we don't have coding systems for a lot of the information today. So I'd say
Mhm.
that's another aspect of what we do, and also we make that technology available to life sciences companies or researchers, government, et cetera, to use on their own for the same reasons.
Do you think that there is understanding on behalf of the life sciences companies as well as the regulatory agencies of what they need to look for from the auditability standpoint? Do we know what we need to make transparent, or is this every new evaluation is a little bit different?
I've only been part of the evaluations I've been part of, but I will say that it's relatively easy for a regulator to audit traceability. And by that, I mean that they become less interested in every transformation as opposed to ensuring that what they see in the final data set that they receive is the same as what appeared in a medical record system or other systems of record at the provider for that specific patient.
Mhm.
So, yes, being able to demonstrate the traceability is not purely defined by the guidance documents, other than that you need to demonstrate that. But being able to audit that, I think that that's done quite frequently, and so that's pretty clear in terms of um, what that translates to. I think that the understanding the traceability is relatively clear. What becomes a little less clear is when transformations involve algorithms. So for us in the work we do, we will transform via algorithms unstructured data into structured text that goes, structured field that could be used in a submission. And that requires really robust validation of those algorithms and demonstrating that those validation reports and information, so it can be repeated and retested if needed, but to demonstrate um, a lot of information on positive predictive value, negative predictive value, area under the curve, and other things, so you understand the validity of the data that's being extracted from unstructured data for the particular purpose. I think that's much less well understood.